Hey, well, my name is Matthew Scutter. I'm the founder of SkySight. I also done a fair bit of gliding all around the world, so I've been to a fair few different competitions. So I bumped into a lot of people around the place. Some people might recognize me, but I'm spending a bit more time in Europe these days, trying to do 3 months a year out here, visiting competitions, promoting SkySight, and going new places and doing new things.
Have you seen our Friday video?
I saw that you had put together something professional. I haven't watched it with the audio on yet, and that was
Right.
kind of a key
I was
thing.
going to ask you what your opinion is of Jake's forecasting, but if you haven't watched it, then we'll have to circle back to that.
I think it's a good idea. I'm looking forward to seeing some more. Maybe you should do some for the continent.
Yeah, well, if we get customers from the continent, then maybe we'll consider it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think you have to set up a shop over here, don't you, to get around Brexit and all that?
Yeah, we need to undo Brexit. We need to join the EU. That's what we need to do.
You just got to set up a branch out here.
We'll think about it. Yeah. Do you want to start one?
Not me, but I could probably help you find a kid out here to do it.
We'll work on it.
Well, I mean, speaking of videos, I really enjoyed your recent videos on Euroglide. It's quite nice to see someone actually post stuff and it be, well, A, fun and B, a video.
Yeah, I mean, I did that kind of thing in the past, like particularly, I think the 2016 or 2017 Worlds in Lithuania. I did some video reviews, and you get teased for it endlessly, but I do think it is actually helpful and interesting to people. So I thought I'd give it another try again and see if it got some engagement. And the world seems to be a little bit different now. It seems to be a little bit more socially acceptable or interesting to do vlogging and that kind of stuff. I don't know if it's the demographic in gliding has changed or what, but people seem to enjoy it a lot more. So I'll keep trying to do some more. It's not even that much effort. I don't plan it or anything. I just get the camera out when something interesting is happening, or just after I land, talk for 30 seconds and turn it off. It's just not that much of an imposition.
Yeah, I do think it has changed quite a bit, but I think we need a lot more content in aviation. So seeing someone else also doing it is really good. And you're also really good on camera, so that definitely helps.
Really so little effort into them. I wish there was people out there who are willing to put a bit more effort into it, into production value and things like that. But at least now I've got a nice camera, and that makes it a bit better.
One of the things I've noticed is people probably didn't realize that Euroglide existed before your videos recently. I think there's a big chunk of the gliding audience who didn't know what it was. So do you want to introduce it and tell us what it is and why you filmed it?
Yeah, I think it's actually one of the oldest competitions in gliding. But the idea is that instead of having a defined task each day and you launch from one place and land in the same place again, you instead have a 2,500 kilometer task. It used to be 2,000 K, but gliders have got a bit better lately. Now it's up to 2,500. And it's just however long it takes you. There's a bunch of quite complex rules about exactly the circumstances, how you do all these different things that are not that important. The basic principle is really just each day you launch and you try and make some forward progress. And hopefully by the end of 2 weeks, you've got all the way back around from Venlo back to Venlo again. So Venlo's just on the border of France, Germany, and the Netherlands. It's quite a complicated gliding location surrounded by some pretty severe airspace. But of course, it's not a problem because you spend about 20 minutes at Venlo and the rest of the time you're off racing. But if you like the kind of racing which is definitely not focused on gaggles, I think I thermaled with 4 gliders over 2,500 K. It was basically just always flying by yourself. And if you like really big picture, meteorological scale, meteorological navigation decisions, that kind of thing, like, that you get from a big AAT or something like that. If that kind of thing is the thing that interests you in sailplane racing compared to, say, start games or tactics or flams or radars or gaggles, then Euroglide could really be the contest for you. It's been very popular for a very, very long time. They almost always book out with over 100 gliders there. I think there was 120 gliders or 120 people flying it at least this year. So it's definitely not unpopular, but it is largely Dutch. I think more than half the competitors come from the Netherlands each year. I'm not really sure why that is. I think the rules detract from it a little bit, that it's a bit too complex for most people who haven't already flown it to get their heads around in the beginning, and maybe that is why it's not more popular. But I mean, they couldn't really host any more gliders than they already have there. So I don't think Euroglide needs to change, but rather I think it'd be great if we get more events like this, more kinds of travel by glider competitions.
Yeah, I think probably a part of it is also people just don't know about it. I mean, I only found out probably about 2 years ago, something like that, and I've been gliding for quite a while. So I mean, I think the sort of stuff you were doing recently, I think really helps promote it and sort of show it to people. But one of the things that sort of got me very interested is the logistics of it all, because you find out how soon do you find out the task?
Oh, I've known it for months.
So
But that actually, it kind of reminds me, I read in an old sail planning gliding magazine, I think, one of the first competitions in the Soviet Union or something like that, where they let in Western pilots, but they had to book the airspace for the tasks a month in advance. So they set all of the tasks for each day a month in advance, and then it'd be, well, it's raining today, but the tasks are 500 because that's what we booked, and you'd have to go deal with it. With the task predefined so far in advance and no idea what the weather is going to be, it really is. It's a significant challenge in terms of planning, logistics, and all that. So I think it really makes it interesting. Actually, it's a positive, not a negative.
Obviously, you look at the forecast, you see which section of the sky is going to be working for you that day, and you make that plan for the route. That sort of get. How do you get accommodation, food, and all that sort of sorted out? Because obviously you're not landing back on the same airfield, so you can't pitch a tent and come back to it at the end of the day. So how does that work?
So, I mean, I've never done it before. So the way I decided to do it was Sophie followed along with our camper van and also the glider trailer, just full of stuff with stuff to eat, a little gas cooker. We had a tent as well, but mostly we just slept in the car, and that was quite straightforward. But I think probably even the majority of participants are going by themselves in their gliders with no support crew, and they just figure it out. And I spoke to probably a dozen people on the grid before we went, and not a single person had ever had to sleep outside the whole time. They always land and they figure something out. They find a local who says, "I'll come stay with me," or they walk into town, or they just sort it out, and it just seems to work. It definitely is a bit of a strategic advantage if you want to win, though, I think, having someone following you, because, I mean, I was landing some days at like 8 p.m. or something like that. And if you do that, then, well, it's not very long before it's dark and everything's closed. So I think you probably have to land a little bit early if you're going to do that. But the vast majority of participants at Euroglide are not hardcore racers. They're there to have fun. They're a big group of friends. Maybe it's 4 people in an Arcus and they're swapping 2 each day, or it's just really stuff like that. And they're quite happy to land at 4 or 5 o'clock, walk into town, have a nice dinner, find somewhere to sleep while there's still plenty of daylight, and not take it that seriously. And I think if you're going to approach it like that, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with, then it's really just not a problem at all.
That does sound actually genuinely very fun. Proper adventure, proper gliding adventure. I mean, I like the idea of camping in general. Gliding camping sounds fun.
The model I saw that I think works really, really well is you have a crew that follows. So you have 2 of you in an Arcus or a duo or something like that. It doesn't even have to be a motor glider, just a pure glider. And then you have 2 following in a car with a trailer. And inside the trailer, you have a fully assembled campsite. So you have your tables, your chairs, your tents. And then when you get to your rough destination airfield, you chuck all that out, and hopefully the glider makes it. If it doesn't, you go pick it up and you bring it to the airfield and rig it. And then the next day you put the campsite, just fully assembled, popped up tents and everything, just in the trailer, close the lid on it and drive off wherever you're aiming for next. And I think it's a really great combination hybrid of camping, traveling and gliding.
Tell us a bit about your flying, because right now, what are you flying nowadays?
I'm flying a JS3 Res, and I was flying an 18-meter configuration for Euroglide, which is a little bit of a complex glider because, I mean, I need to fuel it, so to speak. And charging a glider is just one extra complication that most of the other people don't have. But I get the advantage for that, and I have a very reliable and very powerful system. So some of these places we land perhaps don't traditionally have motor gliders flying out of them. They've got quite short runways, and that could be quite scary in a petrol motor glider. But in the electric motor glider, I have quite a bit more power and confidence getting out of those. So there's advantages and disadvantages.
How long have you been gliding in general?
I think I started in like 2009 or 2010. So I guess it's been 14 years now. 14 years and about 4,000 hours.
Okay. And then what's your gliding career been like? Have you did you go solo, means you go into cross country, or did you stick around for a bit doing some local soaring? What did that look like?
Well, it started definitely with cross country. There was a little bit of misunderstanding of the responsibilities of a first solo pilot. So my second flight was my first cross country flight. I just got in the glider and off I went. So I did 100K up and return in my second flight in a fixed undercarriage Grob 102. There was a long, stern conversation with my instructor after that about, no, that actually comes a little bit later. And then my gliding wasn't really going anywhere for a while before an instructor told me about Euroglide, which is our version of the Australian Nationals. And I think he was trying to placate me after I just failed a conversion from the club Hornet to the club Discus. And he said, oh, well, what if you start working towards going to Euroglide? And I went to Euroglide, and I wouldn't say I loved the competition so much, but I loved the rapid feedback that you very rapidly learn when you're doing something wrong, you're doing something right, based on 30 other gliders going ahead of you or getting behind you. And that really got me hooked, just the rapid learning experience I had at competitions. And I started flying a lot at a lot of competitions. And I quite quickly started winning the junior nationals and got myself onto the junior team in the lead up to the Worlds in 2015, the junior Worlds that is. And at the same time, I went to Europe and started doing a little bit of practice out here. And for Australians, that's really the big lesson is, it's a pattern we've seen time and time again, that people go to Europe and they get some experience flying against a much higher standard of pilots in much more difficult conditions. And then they come back and they start winning Australian nationals. And that was what happened to me. I came back and won my first senior nationals. And then we had the Junior Worlds in Australia, and I won the Junior Worlds. That was the same time I made SkySight, which was also for the Junior Worlds as well. And then I sort of started doing a bit more flying in Europe. I got fairly bored of flying in Australia. Just the flatlands are quite monotonous. We have interesting weather patterns for sure, but they come every week or two. Whereas in Europe, there's still so many things for me to discover, so many different locations to fly. So I've really been enjoying that the last couple of years, going to the Alps, I went to Bosnia last year. Just trying to do a little bit of different stuff.
Okay. I mean, you skimmed over that cross-country flight on one of your first solos. I mean, we have to go back to that. Tell me what happened there.
I really don't remember a lot. I just remember it was a booming cross-country day. It was like 10,000 feet, which is, not that abnormal for where I was flying in Gula. But it had not been made clear to me that once you're solo, that wasn't it, and that there was meant to be more training before you're allowed to often go cross-country and outlandings and all that kind of thing. So then I had to take a few steps back and I had to demonstrate some outlandings and all that kind of stuff. And then I was actually allowed to go cross-country again after that.
So you just sort of jumped in a glider and thought, yeah, I'll go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine how that would be surprising for someone in the UK, where cross-country is quite an endeavour. When the cloud base is 10,000 feet, it's less of an ordeal in Australia.
Yeah,
we rarely send early cross-country pilots on cross-country on a day unless you're getting at least, 6, 7, 8, 9,000 feet above ground.
Right, fair enough. Yeah.
Safety.
I remember the last 6,000 foot cloud base. Okay, so I mean, you said that it's quite common for Australians to come to Europe and then start winning championships in Australia. Can you sort of explain a bit about the differences then in flying Australia, flying here, and sort of why that is?
I think the biggest thing is learning patience. And I think it's something very much you learn as you do more and more gliding to a higher level. The secret to going faster is going slower, that you take more considered decisions, you take bigger deviations, you push less. And as a result, somehow, you make less mistakes, you spend less time in fields, and you go faster overall and win more competitions. And that took me in particular. I think I was an exceptionally bad case, a very long time to learn. I've always been extremely impatient. So coming to Europe, where the conditions are much more difficult and much more punishing, you learn that pretty quickly. That's why the UK punches above its weight in world competitions, is because you have some of the most challenging flying conditions in the UK.
When this video goes live, will be probably when Euroglide actually ends, because it hasn't ended yet, has it?
No, and people are still flying. So I finished it on Friday last week, and the finale is Friday this week, and there's still gliders out on task, and as far as I know, no one else has finished.
So how many days did you take them to finish it off?
5 days, but one day was a cancelled no flying day because there was a fatality.
Yeah, I think we mentioned it in last week's show that there was an accident happening there. So really, you're just showing off. You finish one competition and try to jump to the next one.
That was the hope, yeah. But it just didn't quite work out with the timing. If we hadn't lost that extra day, maybe it would have been possible, but it didn't pan out. Your
lifestyle in general is quite interesting to me because you do a lot of competitions, a lot of flying every single year. So what does that look like to you, like an average year? Where do you go? How do you sort of plan your year?
I'm trying to spend about 90 days in Europe each year, which is the limit of the visa I get. So I come here just for the best of the soaring season and then spend the rest of the time in Australia, really. But I've been suckered into Perlan a few times, been down to Argentina and helped them out in August, September each year. And this year I'm going to Uvalde. I'm very fortunate to have that lifestyle enabled by SkySight, which on one hand requires me to do that kind of stuff, to go and meet people, talk about the product, keep developing the product, visit locations to test the product. So It's just panned out that way. It was not. It was never the plan, so to speak.
What was the plan?
To go back to Google. So I was working at Google up until 2017, and Brexit was happening, and I thought I'd take a sabbatical for a couple of years and go see Europe. And in the meantime, I tried to make some money off SkySight. The plan was always to go back to Google in 2019 or something like that. But hopefully they're not waiting for me.
Yes.
I don't think they're missing me.
That's quite an impressive, well, no, probably a surprising, but quite an impressive change in lifestyle. So it is really cool. I'm quite jealous. What have you been doing with Perlan? Because you mentioned you helped them with something. What was that you were doing?
Well, I mean, they are doing wave flying up to trying to get to 100,000 feet. And that's one of the specialties of SkySight, or one of the unique points is we have quite accurate wave forecasts. And they came to me and asked, can you help us predict the wave up at 100,000 feet? And that was a really interesting engineering challenge, just in terms of how to make a model work at those kinds of altitudes and represent the wave realistically. And certainly it taught me a huge amount. And subsequently, it's helped SkySight branch out into a lot of military aerospace stuff as well. So we're now doing forecasts for drones that are flying up at those kinds of altitudes who want to avoid the wave. But for Perlan, of course, they wanted to know exactly where it was so they could utilize it.
And then, so what sort of the differences like that height? What would people expect?
Well, so most people don't even run weather models that high because there's not really anything interesting happening in the atmosphere up there. But in reality, of course, the wave propagates up that high and possibly even way beyond, maybe to 180 or 300,000 feet. And most of the modeling technology, you have to have a top on the weather model at some point. You say, okay, we're going to go up to 60,000 feet or something like that. And you have to design a weather model for Perlan then that doesn't have that top, or has the top much higher, and handle with the possibilities of things like the waves bouncing off the top, because you know how waves bounce off the ground. So the ground is the bottom of the weather model. What happens at the top? You can't just have it go out the top of the weather model because you're not forecasting above the top of the weather model. So you have to come up with some way to handle the top of the weather model as well as the bottom and predict the conditions. The other really unique thing that can happen is waves break. So, I mean, you've seen waves at the beach break. Mountain waves break as well, but usually they're breaking up at 70,000 feet or something like that. And what happens if you're surfing the wave in a glider and the wave breaks? Well, I don't want to be in the glider to find out. Possibly something will happen. And it's one of the things we're trying to predict and maybe avoid.
I never would have thought about that. That's quite impressive. Have you seen the actual glider?
Yeah. I've been down at Argentina with them for most of their missions. It's pretty impressive glider, and a pretty impressive tow plane as well. It's worth mentioning. The egret that tows it up is a German spy plane. It's a spaceship. And I mean, it's aero towing them up to 50,000 feet. So it's a pretty cool plane.
And what does their setup look like then?
They have a giant hangar down there, courtesy of the local aero club, and a little mission booth off to the side. And basically, we sit and shiver in the cold, push them out on the runway once a week, and aero tow them up to 50 grand, and then see if they can get up to 100 grand.
Is there anything particular about that part of the world that sort of makes it optimum for wave flying? Or
yeah, you have the polar vortex nearby. So the polar vortex is, or if you think about a tennis ball, if you tried to brush all the hairs on a tennis ball in one direction, you go around the middle and that's quite easy. And then you get to the poles and things get quite weird. Like, how do you brush the hairs without them going around to a point? And what actually happens is the air starts spinning super, super fast until you get right to the end where it suddenly stops. So you have this layer near the bottom of the ball or bottom of the globe where the wind is going really, really fast all the way up to really high altitudes, and that's getting pushed over some of the mountains in Chile down that far south, and that creates stronger, higher, more consistent waves than anywhere else in the world.
Awesome. All right then, so obviously meteorology is your bread and butter, and I feel like meteorology is something that a lot of glider pilots struggle with. I know I struggled with it a long time. I failed my bronze test twice because of meteorology. Is there some sort of hints and tips, some advice you have for people who are learning it for the first time, what they can look at?
I mean, my philosophy is I'm not a meteorologist. I'd say I'm a software engineer, and I'm trying to design a product that does not, in fact, require people to learn arcane words and technologies and things like that. And I think most of the problems with forecasting, or many of the problems that comp organizers encounter, because they're trying to apply these ancient philosophies and techniques to the modern world. So things like trigger temperatures and all that kind of stuff, that was from the days when you did a balloon flight yourself at 7 in the morning. It doesn't really make sense to go, well, the trigger temperature is 21 degrees based on the model, because if you get to 21 degrees and the model, or if it's forecast to be 21 degrees and it's not, and then the model was wrong, and then trying to rely on, we need to get up to the trigger temperatures, and it just doesn't make sense. You need to understand why the model didn't get there. So I'm very much trying to promote a culture of not burdening students with things like SKUTs and stuff like that, and trying to produce tools for people that they don't need that kind of meteorological background to understand the weather. I think making it sound like some arcane thing hidden behind a wall in an ivory tower of bearded men and stuff like that, it just makes it more complex than it needs to be. That really it's not that difficult to understand. There's going to be cumulus here, there's going to be blue there, there's a risk of thunderstorms there. I want that to be the kind of detail that glider pilots need and are able to access within SkySight at least.
Okay. So really what we need really is a culture shift.
Yeah, I mean, I think just a lot of the stuff we're teaching people is not actually the practical skills that they need today. It's like you don't necessarily need a sound understanding of aerodynamics down to Reynolds numbers to understand how to fly a glider. You're actually quite capable of figuring out stick goes left, stick goes right, glider rolls left, glider rolls right, without completely understanding the physics. I mean, sure, I think there's an elementary understanding that should be there, but a lot of this stuff is actually not necessary, and we could advance students a lot more and keep them more engaged if we kept a little bit less with the arcane stuff and got them flying a bit quicker.
Okay. And then any sort of thing that helped you get that understanding that might help other people?
I read some of the books, but really I wouldn't portray myself as being an expert in meteorology or anything like that. I'd say I'm an expert glider pilot and software engineer, and it's the combination of those two that has helped me produce SkySight rather than any strong meteorological background. I've had to lean on others substantially in order to get those parts of SkySight right.
Okay. And then what's your future look like? What have you got planned both for SkySight and for your own flying?
So SkySight, we're doing more and more in the drone space, more stuff for these high altitude military companies, which is not so interesting for the glider pilots, except that it brings in a lot of money, which lets us buy a lot better quality data, which lets us make better forecasts for the glider pilots. So a lot of my time is consumed with that. And for my own gliding, I'm continuing to explore more and more different locations. I really like to get to Spain and explore central Spain a bit, which used to be the go-to place in like the 70s and 80s. People used to go there to do their 1,000 Ks, and now that's not the vogue anymore. Now, I think actually just the performance and the forecasting got so much better in Germany that Germans don't need to leave Germany anymore. But I think there's really interesting things that happen down in Spain with mega weather conditions for large portions of the year. So I'd like to go explore that maybe next year. I had a really great time in Italy last year at Rieti. I'm just going to keep exploring, trying to find new things, new places, and new projects.
Anything similar to Euroglide that you're looking forward to? Any other competitions that you're aware of that sound really interesting? Or
I mean, I wish there was more comps like Euroglide, and I have half a mind to create one of my own if no one else does. But I'll have to see what else I can find.
Okay, awesome. Well, I mean, to be honest, I think that's everything from me. Is there anything you'd like to say?
No, it's been great chatting to you. I hope your podcast becomes a great success.
Thanks. I mean, to be honest, so do I. I think there's a lot of really cool stories out there from people from all walks of life. So I'd like to talk to more people and hear what they have to say.
Yeah, I can try and get you a few more interviewees if you want.
Yeah, happily.
You could probably get Luca from FES on your show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, happily. Definitely.
And probably Tony Sibunk from Soaring XX would be happy to share his story too.
Yeah. Well, we actually we supply stuff, so that should be quite easy to organise from listening as well. Well, I mean, yeah. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for talking. I think your story is very interesting, and I'd love to talk to you in the future. Well done for showing up Euroglide. Yeah, we'll chat soon.
All right, sounds good. See you later.